listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, we made it, folks. We made it through the weekend. It's now Monday. Welcome to your Monday evening. Welcome to the show. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. You can come on over, watch the video simulcast, and join the live chat room, which is the best part of coming over there, over at my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Come on over and join the fun. It's already starting. And so welcome to Monday. This last Sunday, I had my wife, Rainey, on our Sunday morning program. Now, that's not broadcast here on the Odyssey Radio Network, but I do a live stream every Sunday morning at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, a.m. Eastern, a.m. Central, and a.m. At 7 a.m. on the West Coast. And so every Sunday, we're a little more informal, and I had my wife in, and we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about relationship, we talked about raising kids, and of course our children were here with us in and out of the room. I just deliberately left that door open so you get a sense of what it's like around here on a daily basis. Now, thank God the schools opened back up. Now, we had a little bit of misgivings as to whether or not we were going to send our kids back into the public setting in school, but it worked out just fine. Remember, keep in mind, from mid-March of this year until a week ago, our kids, all three of them, ranging ages 5, 8, and 11, were all home. And that first half of that 6 months, we were all under this kind of publicly acknowledged sequestration and self-isolation. So we had about 3 months of the kids home, just pretty much all being indoors. It was still the end of winter and cold, and then it turned into spring. They get to play outside, a little more playing with friends, a little more scouting picked up again, and now school. So thank God, after 6 months of loving our children to death, and of course the lunacy of having 3 kids here all day, and my wife worked here and I worked here, and my wife started working outside the home, doing some massages a few days a week. You know what? It's a nice break. Just this morning, my wife went back to bed after we took the kids to school, and I went upstairs and woke her up, and after a while, and she said it was so nice to sleep in without kids jumping on me. And so that's the beauty of that. And so it's nice having the kids back in school. At the same time yesterday, we talked about something, and Niall brought this up. He brought up a couple of really good points about, relationship and how those things work. And he did bring up, and he asked a question about expectations. And so I thought that might be a good thing to talk about today. Expectations in our relationships, expectations in our lives in general. And, it's not in any way to point a bony finger of judgment at Rainey or at myself or at anybody else. It's a general look at how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive our partners, how we govern and guide our relationships. And I got a few things I want to talk about. The whole idea of expectations, the psychology of expectations, as well as the psychology of expectations in our relationships, in our marriages. And so you can almost subtitle this, Why Unrealistic Expectations Are Premeditated Resentments. Let me restate that because I fumbled the word. Our unrealistic expectations are premeditated resentments, especially when we bring them into relationships. So maybe you've heard the saying, expectations are premeditated resentments. And I believe this slogan, which apparently it originated in the 12-step program in AA, but it contains some really useful practical information for all of us about the psychology of expectations. Its wisdom can be derived by acknowledging two psychological facts. First, merely expecting something to happen won't make it happen. That's like a big duh after that. Developmental psychologist Jean Piaget noted that young children have difficulty distinguishing between the subjective worlds in their heads and the outer objective world that they experience. And although, according to Piaget, children will sometimes believe that their thoughts can directly cause things to happen. For example, thinking angry thoughts about your little brother can cause him to fall down the stairs. I know my kids practice that all the time. Angry thoughts about my brother and my sister falling down the stairs or something, some other heinous accident happening to them. And this is referred to as magical thinking. And it kind of suggests that we all outgrow it around age 7. It's childlike magical thinking. And that's where Piaget went wrong in her evaluations. It turns out that many normal adults, and now I'll put myself in the normal category, I might even put my wife in the normal category, although that's a stretch for me some days because of my expectations of her being totally above normal. It turns out that many normal adults continue to engage in various forms of magical thinking. Now, I don't want to step on any toes with this. I certainly don't want to insult your religious or your spiritual predilections or the ways you practice, but prayer can be a form of magical thinking. And sometimes not just in a negative way, it can be in a positive way. We can pray, we can meditate, we can visualize and manifest things. So witness the huge popularity of the law of attraction, which says that our thoughts attract events into our lives. And for many of us, it's difficult to let go of the idea that expecting something to happen is going to actually make it happen. Now, we can visualize, we can have intent, and we can work at manifesting all we want, but our expectations shouldn't be that we're actually able to make that happen, but we enter with that attitude of magical thinking, one that if I manifest this, I can make it happen. And the negative of that is when you get stuck in that and you raise your expectations to meet your manifestation. Now, there is a certain element of that where if you don't expect that it's going to happen, why even manifest? Because you're going to kill yourself, shoot yourself in the foot with it before you even get it rolling. But you get the idea there. Now, the second thing is that human beings have a natural tendency to put their hopes for happiness on fulfilled expectations. I will be happy if this thing, this expectation I have of my job, my life, my partner, my friendships, my whatever, are fulfilled. Once those are fulfilled, I have happiness. And that's the expectation. That's the magical thinking that we apply. Now, there's nothing wrong with this in and of itself, as long as we have good reasons to believe that fulfilling an expectation is something that's truly going to make us happy. And we take the necessary steps toward fulfilling those expectations. So good reasons might include us knowing from past experience that certain things make us happy. I can tell you this, and this sounds materialistic, and I don't mean it to be materialistic, but I know that if I earn a shitload of money on something, that's going to make me temporarily happy. We pay the bills, we go get a couple of toys, and maybe take a vacation, whatever it might be. Those are the things we put expectations on. And we can fulfill those and make those happen. And perhaps that's also part of the magical thinking. We manifest. We put it out there, we visualize it, we work with intent, and we manifest to make that expectation happen. Now, here's an example. I know from experience that my morning cup of coffee, which I still have a cup of coffee with me now, will inevitably give me a little bit of happiness. I therefore expect that this experience each morning, after I finish my stumbling around in the kitchen, bumbling around, maybe doing the dishes in the morning, I make my coffee. I kind of set up these goals for myself. I'm going to brew my coffee. I'm going to try to get the dishwasher unloaded from last night before that happens, so I can go out and enjoy my cup of coffee. Sometimes I extend that into washing the dishes. I'm going to get these all done. I'm going to get the kitchen clean. I can do it. This time I surely can do it in 10 minutes. And it still always takes a half hour to 40 minutes. But then I can reward myself with my coffee, and that makes me happy. So I therefore expect that this experience each morning after I finish all of my stuff, all of my stuff which give me an incredible amount of happiness, that this expectation will be fulfilled. I'm having my cup of coffee. So now, the problem of expectation occurs when we expect something to happen without the good reason behind expecting that. If I believe that my expectations alone are going to bring me what I want, I'm using that magical thinking, that Puff the Magic Dragon thinking, and settling myself up for disappointment. So if I have expectations without manifesting or working at it or having realistic goals at the end of that expectation, I've set myself up to be disappointed and to fall. So this is really obvious when we're talking about coffee. I can't make a cup of coffee by just thinking it into existence. I have to take the necessary steps to make that happen. I have to sometimes grind the beans, sometimes I use pre-ground beans. I put the coffee in the water in my coffee maker, and I push the button. And I've learned by experience to never stand and just expect that coffee will magically appear in a minute either. It takes a few minutes. And just expecting my cup of coffee to appear is delusional. I'm not going to wake up and have it in my hand. Albeit this morning, when we're all getting ready for school, getting the kids going, I hadn't made my coffee yet. I slept a little too long. And I'm getting ready to walk out the door, and I was going to make a pot of coffee, even though we were starting to run behind. And I see a travel mug with the lid on it, and I see my brand of cream for my coffee sitting out, and the coffee maker's hot and the light's on, and I looked at Rainey coming down, and she's still her hair sticking up all over. She's in her pajamas. You've all seen her that way. She comes, I said, "Did you make me coffee? Is this my coffee in this mug?" And she said, "Yes, I did." And I'm like, There, I didn't have to make the coffee. Now, I didn't have an expectation that she would get up and do that for me, but she did it, and I was surprised. But thinking that the coffee's going to appear out of nowhere, like it did for me this morning, I didn't have to work for it. My wife did that for me. That's when our expectations become that magical thinking. Now, most of us are sane enough to realize that expecting a cup of coffee to materialize from our thoughts is unrealistic. Yet many of us at some point have mistakenly believed that expecting others to behave the way we want them to behave will actually make them behave that way. That's the same as that magical cup of coffee appearing out of nowhere. One member of a couple might expect the other to make the coffee for them. Expect the other to make the coffee. This is fine and good if the other person is happy to do it. But what happens if the other person has no interest in living up to your expectation that they will make you coffee? Oh, he feels shocked, morally indignant, and that leads to resentment. Now, this is an oversimplified example, but you get what I mean. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Now, I've got an expectation that I shouldn't be plagued by flies in my office, but there's always one or two of them hovering around. That's why you see me waving my hands over in the video. I got one or two flies in here. I can't seem to ever get rid of them. I think they'll be here half the winter until I hunt them down. So it should be easy to think of examples in your own life where you felt resentful toward people who didn't live up to your expectations. I have an expectation of this person and they didn't live up to it, and you start getting resentful of them. Now, it's certainly easy to find examples of this. You can find it all over. There was one example I looked up that said, "I'm sitting at the party. I planned it so perfectly. I would throw a surprise party for my best friend on my birthday. She'll be so surprised. She walks in the door, she looks surprised, she greets everyone and thanks them for coming. She seems to be happy, yet I know her better than anyone. I don't feel that she's excited as I expected her to be. I don't sense the appreciation that I had expected her to display. And I start to feel a little resentful, a little bit upset. I feel annoyed. What is this other what is this other feeling that's gnawing at me? I start to feel resentment. All the planning, all the work, giving up my birthday celebration so I could celebrate hers. I quietly acknowledge what I'm feeling and I remind myself expectations are premeditated resentments. There's a whole list of these things. I got a bullet point list. Ever order a steak in a restaurant is medium rare and it gets served to you well done? My expectation is that the chef's going to make it the way I asked. Ever asked your kid in the morning to do the dishes and come home from work to find they're not done? Ever go to on a drive somewhere and it takes you twice as long because of the construction? Ever do tons of exercise and get on the scale 2 weeks later to find you're the same weight you were 2 weeks ago? Ever go to your doctor for a routine earwax clean out and leave with a surgery date in your hand? Those are maybe some unrealistic expectations. So expecting life to always turn out the way you want is guaranteed to lead you down the path to disappointment, because life will not always work and turn out the way you want it to. And that's a very realistic outlook on life and a very realistic commentary on how we all live. We have expectations, but if we're not aware of it, those expectations are guaranteed to lead to disappointment, because life doesn't always turn out the way we want it to turn out. And when those unfulfilled expectations involve the failure of other people to behave the way I expect them to behave, the disappointment starts to involve resentment. That other person is not acting or doing the things I expected them to do. And I could bring this personal and say, I have expectations of my wife, and it irritates me, and I get resentful if she doesn't do what I expected she should do or should be. And, this fly is bugging the hell out of me. That's why they call them bugs. You brush them away. I expect that brushing away that fly is going to make it go away, and it keeps landing on my face and my ears, and I'm becoming angry, annoyed, and resentful, because my expectation is that it's just going to fly away because I swish it away with my hand. So, why is it that we don't get upset when a cup of coffee doesn't make itself? But we might get upset if someone else does not make us the cup of coffee. Where do we get the sense of power to think that merely expecting the other person or others in general to behave the way we want them to behave will make them behave that way? Who the hell am I? Where is my arrogance to think that that other person or persons should act the way I expect them to act? And what entitles me to get angry at other people when they fail to meet my expectations? Why do I feel so damn entitled? So my research on moral psychology tells me that expectations among people are often based on an implicit social contract. That is, without actually verbalizing expectations about give and take in a relationship, people construct stories in their head, those magical things, those things that we imagine in our minds, about legitimate expectations of each other. So people in a relationship have a deal, quote unquote, in which the specifics of the deal are never really talked about. And it's hard for someone to live up to your expectations when they don't know what they are. But you still might see this as a failure, a violation of your social contract. And for example, there was a author I read, Mary Schaefer, and she wrote about how she listened to a friend's problems for years. even though it was very difficult because she expected her friend to do the same for her when she wanted to talk about her problems. And that didn't happen. And the friendship ended. It's like I give and I give and I give and I give, but she's not giving back. So her expectation was something that was an unspoken expectation. Hey, if I listen to you, I expect you to listen to me. Now, those might be commonplace things, common courtesies, but if we elevate them to expectations of other people and then hold them accountable to our expectation, you can see what we're doing. Unspoken expectations are almost guaranteed to go unfulfilled. So talking openly about what you expect from other people might improve your chances of fulfillment. By learning to not expect people to know what I want and need, I've learned to be much clearer in my communication. I don't expect my wife to know why I'm pouting or why I'm having a problem that day, but I try to tell her why. So, if Rainey sees me in a foul mood, if I've allowed my expectations of my children to be able to pick up their own shit around the house, and they don't do it, I get foul, I get annoyed, I get frustrated, I get angry. Is there resentment of my kids? I try to keep in check that they're kids, and kids do that stuff. But at the same time, the emotions are buried deep down inside. And so when I yell at my kids sometimes, it isn't because I'm trying to train them up right. It's like, I've told you 300 times how to do this thing, and if you can't do it, I'm going to be pissed off, and you're going to be in trouble. But my expectations are way up here. So if I expect that my kids will listen to what I have to say, as they get closer to their teen years, that expectation is going to be dashed on the rocks. So there's got to be other modes that you put into place to make that work. And at the same time, it's unrealistic to think that merely communicating your expectations clearly is going to get people to behave the way you want them to. I don't expect my children to know all the house rules all the time, but I act like that sometime, don't you? I'm very clear when I remind them, even if it's the 200th time, you people, what's the matter with you people? Children not conforming to parents' expectations seems to be a recurring theme in humanity, and especially in my family. So note that one of the items on the list above that I gave you, ever ask your teen in the morning to do the dishes or clean their room? You come home and find it's not done? Or you leave the office and find it's not done after 8 hours? He sat on his video game all day? And you're like, what's the matter with you people? Because my expectation was that he would do what I said. So this points to a second kind of a social contract. One that's based on authority rather than the mutual reciprocity in a relationship or a friendship or a work relationship, whatever you've got going. Parents assume that their children should obey their expectations because adults have the authority to run a household. And isn't that a reasonable thing for parents to expect certain standards of behavior from their children? You might ask that of yourself. I ask it of me all the time. And I'm gravely disappointed. And I'm also gravely disappointed that I'm coming to the end of the first segment, and I've got to pick this thought up when we come back. So all of you sit tight. We got to go out for a couple of minutes of Odyssey commercial breaks, and also time for you to sit back, go pee, and get another cup of coffee, which is not making itself. So sit tight, stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, folks, we're back. Thanks for sitting on through the break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to now the second segment of tonight's show, my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio, and of course all the different outlets where you can hear this show. And at the same time, come on over to the live chat room where we're doing a video simulcast right now. The best part of which is the live chat room. Go on over, join the other Intrep heads in the chat room, and put in your 2 cents worth, or just talk, or just watch the conversation. It's lively, and they have a lot of fun over there. And that's over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. I want to mention a couple of things. As you can see over here, if you're looking at the video, you can see the logo, the Penman hat logo, up in the upper, to you, I think it's going to be the upper right of the screen. Penman hats, you can see some of my hats hanging there. I've talked about them before. John Penman makes the best, the very best, in custom bespoke hats. Go over and see him at penmanhats.com. Get yourself a good lid before the Christmas rush starts. Christmas rush. Christmas is coming, folks. Not far away. Also down in the lower left, over here, I see mirror reflections on my screen. Right over there, Hell's Head Coffee Company. There's going to be more to say about in the upcoming weeks. That's a company where I did all the creative work for a good friend of mine who's also been a client of mine for years. New coffee company coming out. Hell's Head Coffee. And it's got kind of a biker theme to it. So you'll want to take a look at that. I'll give you the website as that comes up. But put that in the back of your brain. And also you can see the logo I did there. The logo on Son of a Patriot over here. The logo for Penman over there. The Intrepid radio program logo. If you're looking at the visuals, that's what I do. Go to my website, Scott Allen Roberts. A-L-A-N for Allen. ScottAllenRoberts.com. See all my work, logo design, illustration, design, package design, corporate identity, blah, 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 all of that good stuff. So come on over and see it and avail yourself of some good graphics, which my wife just talked about during the break. Well, at least over on the video channel. I don't know if that ad made it in tonight over on the Odyssey stream. But let's move on. Let's get back into what we were talking about. We're talking about expectations. The psychology behind expectations. I didn't expect that my cup of coffee was going to be refreshed during the break. You know what I had to do? I had to manifest it. Go make it happen. I had to put feet to it. There's my cup of coffee. Now, my wife could have done that for me. She didn't have to pay attention to what I'm doing all day. Oh, do you need a new cup of coffee, darling? I mean, that would be my wife. And by the way, she's in the room. Say hello, my lovely wife.
Hello.
Say hello to the nice listeners.
Hi, nice listeners.
There you go. That's my wife, Rainey. She's in the studio today, but not participating. She's doing her own thing over there. So now that I've got my coffee refilled, let's pick up where we left off. We were talking about expectations, the psychology of it. We started talking a little bit about children. Well, isn't it reasonable for parents to expect certain standards of behavior from their children? I ask that all the time. I go, my kids are intelligent. They're humans. They're evolving, life evolving. They're no longer babies. They should get it. When Rainey or I say, hey, pick up your stuff. Don't leave it laying around. Hey, you just had a Go-Gurt. You don't take the half-empty tube and put it down the cushion of the sofa. You walk it to the garbage can. I have certain expectations that my children who speak English, my children who know we are the authority figures in the house, as well as their loving parents, are going to do something. It doesn't always work that way, does it? As the father of, I've got 6 kids. I've got twin daughters who are 28 years old, entrepreneurs. They're doing their own thing. My oldest son is 19. And he lives out of state in the area where they live. And I've got my 3 little ones at home that I've mentioned. My 11-year-old boy, my 8-year-old daughter, and my 5-year-old daughter. And so I'd agree that we need to set standards for our children. But failure to do so would make you an irresponsible parent. There are standards you have to make. But you shouldn't expect that your children will follow those standards all the time, as I erroneously do. One of the biggest frustrations in my life is, I have decreed it, therefore it shall be done. So it has been written, so it shall be done, as Yul Brynner said. So thinking this is going to happen is very unrealistic. The fact that I say, this is how it shall happen, is an unrealistic expectation that they're going to fulfill that. And if I believe they will, it's going to lead to disappointment, to anger, annoyance, frustration, and resentment. And the question is, what to do when children do not follow the rules that you've designed to help them live a better life, to grow up and be responsible adults. I don't want to raise my kid to live in a mess, my boy, I'm thinking of specifically there, because you know what? Someday he's going to have roommates, or someday he's going to have probably a wife. Do I want him to be a slob? No. I want him to be responsible. I want him to pick his stuff up. Maybe that develops. I know when I was 11, I was a neatnik. I loved my room and everything was in order and had its place. But I wasn't OCD about it. I just liked a neat environment. When my office gets too cluttered, last night, it's still cluttered, but I had to go through and pick up all the little cluttery things. Because things get thrown on my desk, this gets thrown there, that's over there, and there's certain things I can't find. And I'm like, why can't I find that? It's because of the clutter, so I got to clean it up. And so the big question, especially with kids, is what do you do when they don't follow the rules that are designed to keep them safe, to make them better people, to hopefully lay the groundwork, the foundations of them being contributors to society. And they have to grow into their potential, and you want to help them get there. But sometimes we stunt that by being so angry about our expectations of them being unfulfilled that we can belittle them to the point where maybe we're doing a worse job. So if you think that the answer is to get resentful and angry and look, I'm standing here waiting for the lightning bolt to turn me into a pile of smoldering ashes, when you get resentful and you get angry, you yell and you threaten, we might not need to step back and consider other alternatives. Now, you might have noticed that several times I've distinguished between realistic and unrealistic expectations. That distinction is so important that it's been said the expression should actually be phrased as unrealistic expectations are premeditated resentments. Believing that an unverbalized expectation is going to bring you what you want is magical thinking. You might as well have a wand and say, I don't know, Alexium pervosum, whatever the Latin is, and expecting that doing what in the past has been reliably brought about as a result that you want is realistic. Expecting others to do what is in your interest but not their interest is absolutely unrealistic. It's not of interest to my kids to pick up after themselves if Mom and I follow them around the house and clean up after them. And you know what? I think the trash would have to get pretty deep for my children before they'd think, oh, I better kick this out of the way or put it in a trash bag and throw it out. So experiencing others to do what's in your interest but not their interest is unrealistic. So expecting others to do what's in both of your interests can be absolutely realistic. Now, it's difficult to locate the exact origin of the slogan that says expectations are premeditated resentments. However, I know that slogan is popular in programs like Al-Anon. I was in Al-Anon for a while. My ex-wife was an alcoholic, and I was in Al-Anon before and after the divorce. And alcoholics and addicts tend to be so impaired by their substance abuse that they're unlikely to give up to anyone's expectations. Not having expectations for chemically impaired persons is necessary for keeping one's own sanity. I had to lower my expectations. Eventually, my expectations of that person devolved to divorce. But I'd say that the same is also true not just for children who are frequently unresponsive to expectations due to their immaturity and their natural rebelliousness, which is part of their nature, but to all functioning adults as well. This is because each of us, as an adult, has our own desires and our own agendas. You look at my desires and my agendas, and then compare them to my wife Rainey's list of desires and agendas, and there might be a few items that cross over, but there might be totally different things that we have planned, the things that we had planned on for our lives. And if we expect other people to act in ways that are not consistent with their own interests, they'll probably resist our expectations, leaving us resentful of them for not doing what we think they should be doing. Furthermore, the person is likely to resent you. After all, how do you feel when people expect you to do things that are inconsistent with your own goals and your own values? So let go of expectations. That's the message here on a psychological level. Psychologically speaking, you have to let go, you have to release your expectations. And that's a hard thing to do. You know why? Because it's internal. It's part of who we are. We have our own goals and our own desires, and our expectations are created out of those goals and desires of how we think our lives should work, and all the people around us should click right in. All the cogs in the machine have to fit perfectly, and it runs smoothly. And when it doesn't, we build up this bilge, this resentfulness, this anger, because people don't act the way we think they should. And so, understanding that that's not how we act for somebody else, we should also expect that that's not how they should act for us. And so, even when things don't turn out the way you hoped, you're going to experience a little more serenity rather than resentment. I do my thing, you do your thing. I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine. You are you, and I am me. And if by chance we find each other, it's beautiful. If not, it can't be helped. That was something that was written by Gestalt Therapy, verbatim, the book by Fritz Perls in 1969. So, expectations. Now, what about this whole thing about managing your expectations? Let's focus on something else in particular here. How do you manage your expectations when it comes to you and your partner? A relationship, a marriage. Unrealistic expectations are the root of marital dissatisfaction. Do you know that? They always pull out the bullet list. Finances are the top reasons for divorce. Adultery, abuse, chemical abuse. All of those things are the top of the list. But did you know that really unrealistic expectations are the root of all marital dissatisfaction? So according to psychologist Albert Ellis, we tend to live according to our belief systems. These are the things we hold to be true about the world, ourselves, our relationships with other people, and so on. Excuse me. They might not even be things that were taught to us. It's things we taught ourselves as we grew up and we looked at things. You don't have to sit in a class to develop your sense of how life should work, to develop your sense of how we hold things true in the world around us and in our relationships. Our belief systems are essentially a set of hard facts that we've developed for ourselves, and we live by them for the most part. And they guide how we act and how we think. Each one of us is individuals. None of us is any different. Even if your view of life is maybe one that's disjointed, or you're an enabler, or something like that, even those things are how you have developed your thinking on how you expect life should be lived. And so in intimate relationships, we have standards for how we treat our partner, as well as how we expect to be treated by them. In effect, our belief systems are part of the mindset we bring to a relationship. And some of our beliefs are rational, some are irrational. And sometimes if you're in a long-term relationship, I've been married to my wife it'll be 13 years next month. We've been together for almost 15 years. But have my expectations changed over 15 years? Yeah, we grow. We have different things about life we learn. But some of our beliefs and our rationale and some of our irrationales are those things falling into the latter group that have no basis in fact and are inconsistent with how the world and people actually behave. An irrational belief might be that each partner should always do what the other wants, or sex should always be phenomenal. I'll tell you, with my wife, little personal thing, it's always phenomenal. Is it always phenomenal for her? Maybe not. Maybe her expectations are different. But it's always phenomenal. So, I'm a guy. That's my guy thing. And so we talked about that a bit yesterday. If you want to see that, you can go back and see the archive on my YouTube page for yesterday's It's Sunday with Scotty and Rainey. So our beliefs are what lie beneath our expectations. Our personal belief systems are the foundations of our expectations. And our expectations direct how we think about our partner and our marriage. And it can affect how we treat the other person. There's a big however here, though. While they initially spring from our beliefs, expectations also have a bit of fluidity to them. They can change as a result of what we learn about our partner as we get to know them better. We watch how they behave in different situations. And from there, we have an idea as to how they're going to act when they are faced with other situations. I know very well how my wife is going to act in certain situations. I've learned this about her. Some of them put up a caution sign for me. Caution! Danger! Do not approach! And some of them are very positive. So, and the argument's out there that what really changes is our beliefs about our relationship and our partner. As we change what we believe, we then change what we expect. And most people learn early on that their partner isn't always going to do what they would like them to do. And while sex maybe is always good, it maybe isn't always fantastic. So most couples enter marriage with positive expectations. And I'm not just talking about sex, by the way. I use that as an example. Because we've all been there. We're all there. We all eat at that trough. And so most couples enter their marriages with positive expectations about their partner and their future together. How many people enter marriage and say, my expectations is that we will grow farther and farther apart because we will develop interests that really are polar opposites to each other, and we'll end up in a failed, miserable life together and finally divorce and divide up our goods and our children if we have them. Is that how we enter marriage? No, we all enter marriage with positive, for the most part, let's say, positive expectations. And positive expectations have important benefits. They allow us to think positively about our partner. And that leads to better interactions, better feelings toward each other. Excuse me. However, positive expectations can be a problem when they're too positive. People, I've found this, and it's been found in many psychological circles that examine relationship behavior. Most people expect, they have expectations about retirement, let's say. Before they can retire, those expectations can affect how well they adjust after they actually leave the workforce. When their expectations are too positive, very often the reality of retirement doesn't measure up. Consequently, over-optimistic retirees aren't as often as happy out of their jobs as they thought they would be, even though they lived their whole lives planning to be out of their job and have all that free time. And those who feel that way tend to become disenchanted with that new lifestyle. So such disappointments can really have harmful consequences. And we're likely to experience a variety of negative emotions, including depression. And these emotions make it hard for us to get motivated because we don't think we can make our lives any more fulfilling than we're doing. So instead, we might look to get rid of our disappointments by getting out of the situation, such as going back to work if you're retired and dissatisfied with retirement. Now, that's just an example I'm using. The same holds for our marriages, our partnerships, our relationships. Exceedingly high expectations can be really hard to satisfy. And if we don't adjust what we expect from our marriage and that other person to reflect reality, we run the risk of being continually disappointed with the other person. Disappointment, in turn, can lead to demotivation about building the relationship any further. But it's also to concerns as whether marrying that person was ever the right decision. Oh, God, did I make the right decision with this person? We should also note that, like romantic love, overly positive expectations can be blinding. Romantic love, puppy love, those types of things, infatuations, they can be blinding. We miss all the red flags at the beginning before we even start. But it's the same thing as overly positive expectations of what the relationship is going to be. Because we expect the best, we might initially overlook our partner's shortcomings. Does my wife have shortcomings? Yeah, she left the room, so I can say, yeah, she sure does. But are those real shortcomings, or are they shortcomings that I perceive based on my unreal expectations of what I thought she should be as a wife and a mom? And we come to believe later on that our spouses or the other party in our relationships isn't the person we thought we married. I remember there was a time where Rainey and I were having troubles several years back. We almost didn't make it. You know why? Our expectations of each other were really high and very diverse from each other. And there were times I even said, I made a mistake. I made a mistake marrying this person. How wrong I was in that evaluation, but that's where my head was. Because she was not meeting my expectations, which were really unrealistic. I'm not talking about bad stuff or anything like that. I'm just talking about the daily grind of being in a relationship with somebody. Some of the people will say, well, why do you want to be in a relationship with somebody if it's a daily grind? Well, the daily grind is you found something that you believe is good, and the grind is working on yourself and the other person working on them so you make a beautiful thing together. So Rainey and I are still in the midst of all that. Maybe 20 years from now, we'll have made it into that beautiful stage. But we're working on that. So I'm referring to wishes and should haves. You should do this and not that. Should haves, would haves, could haves. Those are all killers in relationship. You should do this and not that. You should earn more money. I wish you wouldn't say that kind of thing. I wish you acted differently. I wish you cooked better. I've never said that to my wife, by the way. We might compare our partner's words and actions to what we expect that those words and actions should be. That's our expectations. And then we gauge how we feel or treat them based upon whether or not they measure up to our expectation of what we think they should be. Do you see the dirty, nasty trap that is? And when that happens, the relationship is fine if we're forgiving, and then we adjust our expectations so they fit better with how our partner actually behaves. But if, on the other hand, our expectations are deeply embedded and we have difficulty adjusting, we might be perpetually dissatisfied and our partner will be perpetually annoyed and resentful at us of each other. So such a negative mindset makes it easier for partners to get into arguments. And these can be hard things to resolve sometimes because they tend to be about who the partners are as people and not about a specific and fixable issue on how they are as a couple. So for expectations, it comes down to realism, flexibility. The fact that our expectations can change is important for the long-term success of a marriage. But keep in mind, an optimistic outlook and a positive perspective are necessary, but at the same time, you have to keep your eyes and your mind wide open. If you expect your partner to be a certain way, or your relationship should follow a certain path and it doesn't, you might have to acknowledge to yourself that your expectations are unrealistic and you're the one who needs to make the adjustment. And you know what? This works for both people in a relationship. But of course, some of our expectations stem from rational beliefs, and it's realistic to think they should be satisfied, such as being treated with respect. I have an expectation that I should be treated with mutual respect. Not respect in like a military sense. You respect the rank. I'm your husband and I'm over you. Somebody called me a paranoid misogynist the other day. I said, no, actually, I'm a fearless polygynist. So you can figure that one out. And so if we hold those unrealistic views, it's going to backfire on us and blow up in our face. Expectations that stem from irrational beliefs are those that can't be satisfied by anyone. In other words, my partner should always treat me with affection. She should wake up with a rose in her teeth. And those kinds of expectations are problems. When we hold those expectations and use them to judge and gauge our partner, you're not going to be able to perform to your standards. They won't. But then again, neither will we. And so you have to keep in mind that to manage your expectations is how you make expectations realistic. So the truth is, marital satisfaction has been found to decline over the years. The most dramatic drop-offs occur within the first few years or so, and then again after 7 or 8 years, then again when the first child enters their teen years. So of course not all suffer the same rate and depths of decline, but some may settle on a plateau. And after a few years, they may stay happy throughout, but we've described this tends to happen for many couples. Very few will ever reach the high point of the first few months, ever again. And I think we can find ways to make that fixable in our relationships. So look on the positive expectations. I got to end, so I got to wrap it a little tighter than I wanted to at the end here. Tie that knot quicker. Think about your expectations of your partner. And hopefully they'll see you doing that and they'll do the same. All right, folks, that's it. That's all we got for tonight. We got to go. We're almost over time. So sit tight. We'll be back in 23 hours. right, gang, we're back. Thanks for sitting on through that break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. And you can go over there and find out all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio, find out all the outlets where you can listen to this show. And at the same time, you can come over to my YouTube channel and watch the video simulcast of this show. The best part being, you can almost recite it to me now, the live chat room of fellow Intrepids going on. Come on over, watch the show, and join us in the chat room. I don't have a lot of pictures to show tonight, so it's just going to be my mug talking to you. And but you get to join the chat room and talk about this show and other things going on. And by the way, this is a good time to say last night, while I pre-recorded the show a little earlier in the day yesterday, I'm usually there in the chat room, and I was not last night. So sorry I didn't make it in here, folks. We did have, and it was mentioned by a couple of people, we had a little mishap with my 8-year-old daughter in the 3rd grade. And she went to school with the neighbors yesterday, the next-door neighbors. She wanted to ride with her friend, who was a couple of grades ahead of her. And so she got dropped off, but she decided on her own volition, without texting us, without calling us, without even informing the teacher, that she was going to ride home with her friend. And now I don't have the friend's phone number or anything like that. And so I get there to pick her up. And I pick up Ellie at the kindergarten line. And then I got to loop back around because Rowan hadn't joined her there like she's supposed to. With all this COVID BS going on right now, all the pickups and the drop-offs are all in groups, and it's ridiculous. It's a clusterfuck, if you pardon my language. And so it takes almost 45 minutes to pick up my kids because two of them are in the elementary, and then the other one is over in the middle school. They're all on the same road, but it's all this cluster of trying to get around and get everywhere. And so I drive around. I'm looking for her. She's gone. Teacher doesn't know she's there. The people governing the lines don't know where she is. The principal was even very concerned. She was really concerned, and I really appreciate her reaction to it. She's calling all around. She's trying to find everybody who might know where she went, if she had stated to anyone that she was riding, and they didn't. And of course, you get, as a parent, you get that first flash of internal panic that says, oh my God, my daughter's missing. But then at the same time, I'm thinking maybe, and I said to everybody, she may have just rode home with the next door neighbors. She just didn't ask permission. So nobody knows this. So after driving around, after looking, after checking with everybody, drove over, picked up my son from the middle school, and we went home, which is about a 15-minute drive. 12 minutes, actually. Because we take him to school outside the district, so we have to drive him every morning and pick him up every afternoon. And so I pull in. Sure enough, she's out in the street playing with our next door neighbor, and they're riding bikes, and she yells over to me, "Hi!" and I say, "Hey!" And the ass kicking ensued at that point. And you do not, of your own volition, go on. And I'm sorry, I don't care about all you people who think your kids deserve the right to choose what sex they are at age 8. If they want to change their gender and all of that bullshit, but you're going to freak if they make the decision to maybe go home on their own. You're a parent just like I am. So all parents, my only point with that was just to say that parents who are concerned about their kids are concerned about the decisions they make and concerned about where they go, where they are, what they're doing. And I was just making that quick aside. Oh, unless they want to change their gender. So anyway, I govern where my kids are. And just as a side note, if my children want to change their gender someday, they can do. They'll have the freedom to explore that when they're 18 or older. Ain't gonna happen while they're raised in my house. If you were born a boy, you're gonna be a boy at least until you're 18. If you're born a girl, you're gonna be a girl until you're 18. Because I don't believe that's anything. We won't get into it. Okay, you know where my head is on that. But Suffice it to say, that's why I was not here last night. Not that her being away ended that long. It just corrupted the whole rest of the day, and, things calmed down. But by the time it came to being on the show, I had fallen asleep. I was just tired yesterday and a little out of it anyway. So, sorry I wasn't here last night. All that to say that. Let's move on. We're talking about Samson and looking at a bit of a psychological examination of the guy. He was a sociopath, probably a psychotic. It doesn't take a normal I'm saying that backwards. Normal people don't go out and kill 30 people to get their clothes to fulfill a bet. Psychotics do that. People in social disorders do that. Now maybe it's, well, these are special. These were biblical times. These were the people oppressing the children of God. And he raised up this guy, and even though he was flawed, he was fulfilling God's work. Well, if fulfilling God's work is going out and murdering Philistines to get their clothes, is that God then saying, Samson, wrong reason, but hey, thanks for killing the Philistines. They're oppressing you. Or 1,000 Philistines with a jawbone of an ass. These kinds of feats, they're heroic, all by themselves, but they're darkly heroic. They're psychotically heroic. So let's move on. I wanted to look at some of the esoteric side of the Samson story. And just keep in mind, Samson and Delilah, the traditional story, there's a symbology behind it. Much has been written about Samson and Delilah. There's been movies made, miniseries made, books written, comic books made. Samson and Delilah is a story from the Old Testament. When Samson fell for Delilah in his story, a woman from the valley of Sorek, it marked the beginning of his downfall, as if murdering 30 guys wasn't a downfall. But that was the beginning of his downfall and his eventual demise. And it didn't take long for the rich and powerful Philistine rulers to learn of the affair and immediately pay a visit to Delilah. You see, Samson was a judge over Israel and had been taking out great vengeance on the Philistines. But that's another story. We've already kind of covered that. Hoping to capture him, the Philistine leaders each offered Delilah a sum of money to collaborate with them in a scheme to uncover the secret of Samson's great strength. So a big question here you have to ask right away. Did Delilah actually love Samson? Was it a romance story? Or was it a story of deception from the beginning? So using her powers of seduction and deception, which means she was probably a pretty good-looking babe to have those qualities, Delilah persistently wore down Samson with her repeated requests until he finally divulged the crucial information. And having taken the Nazirite vow at his birth, Samson had been set apart to God. He was consecrated to God, although he didn't act like a man who was consecrated to God. But as I alluded to earlier in the first part, we only see snippets of Samson's life. What were the quiet moments during the 20 years he acted as judge over Israel? Did he have a close relationship with God with these fatal flaws punctuating it, and those made up the story? So as part of that vow, his hair was never to be cut. And when Samson told Delilah that his strength would leave him if a razor were to be used on his head, she cunningly crafted her plan with the Philistine rulers to get rich. She was going to get rich off of betraying Samson. She did not love this guy. And so while Samson slept on her lap, Delilah called in a co-conspirator to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. Maybe they were like dreadlocks, and they're calling them braids. So this is how all that hair, his whole life, never been cut. He had these braids of hair, heavy. And they subdued and weak Samson was captured then. And rather than killing him, the Philistines preferred to humiliate him. They gouged out his eyes. They subjected him to hard labor in a Gaza prison. And as he slaved at grinding grain, the Bible says, the story says, his hair began to grow. But the careless Philistines didn't pay any attention to that. And in spite of his horrible failures and sins of great consequence, Samson's heart now according to the one interpretation, turned to the Lord. He was humbled. He prayed to God, and God answered. And during a pagan sacrificial ritual, the Philistines had gathered in Gaza to celebrate, and as was their custom, they paraded their prized enemy prisoner into the temple to entertain the jeering crowds, and Samson braced himself between the two central support pillars of the temple and pushed, it says, with all his might. And down came the temple, killing Samson and all of the people in it. And through his death, Samson destroyed more of his enemies in this one sacrificial act than he had previously killed in all the battles of his life. So ends the story of Samson. Now, the interesting thing is, we're heard that he repented and he prayed to God. And we don't know that. Who gave us that information? Who was there hearing his private prayer? Maybe he prayed this before he was brought out in front of the people. Maybe he prayed this in private and somebody relayed that story. Maybe he said, I've just prayed and I'm going to ask God to return my power to me so I can kill the Philistines. And we don't know this part of the story. All we know is that he prayed, and was anybody there? We don't know. So there's terminology now in the story of Samson and Delilah. Now, many take this as a literal story, but like many stories in the Bible, I believe it's mythology. Or at the very least, it is a real story with heaps of legendary mythology piled on top of it. Mythology uses names and stories and symbols to convey these deep spiritual truths. And so the story is in the superficial part, and we have to look far deeper for the real meaning behind the story. It has nothing to do with haircuts or a lone man being able to destroy large armies single-handed with the jawbone of an ass. That's not what the story's really supposed to be about, and this is how you can start to decode it from the get-go. So to decode the story, you have to look at the breakdown of some of the key word meanings. Samson, as we've mentioned for a couple of days now, the word means man of the sun in the sky, S-U-N, Samson. Delilah means discouraged, or she who weakened, or languished. And the story's trying to convey the brightness of the higher mind or spirit can be broken if it's consistently and constantly exposed to our carnal nature. And in mysticism, the female always represents the emotions when referring to the lower mind, and the spirit when referring to the higher aspects. So a female represents, in the lower sense, that the emotions, in a higher sense, spirit. And so Samson and Delilah, in their biblical symbology, in Judges 16:4, it says this, and it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman. Samson loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Now Samson, the son of the light, is engrossed with the activity of Delilah, discouragement, the emotions. The valley is the lower, similar to its geological nature. So we have the emotions of lower aspects of the mind being represented in this story. And Sorek, the name, the Valley of Sorek, means special vine or fruitless tree. And so the lower nature that feels so attractive and special that it draws us in is in fact a fruitless pursuit. And what appeals on the outside is empty on the inside. So Valley of Sorek, if you look at this esoteric symbolism, he falls in love with a woman who is languishing, a woman who is fruitless, a woman that represents discouragement in the emotions. And the lords of the Philistines, in verse 5 of that same chapter, came up to her and said to her, entice him. He's fallen in love with you. Entice him. See wherein his great strength lies, and by what means we might prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and will give you, every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. That's a lot of dough. And so they are tempting her with money to betray Samson. Now, we don't ever know if she was ever in love with him, but she certainly loved the idea of becoming very rich as opposed to warning Samson of this. Now, the word Philistines means strangers or thoughts that are not helpful for our spiritual progress. Oh, he's such a Philistine. And or even our overall well-being, not just the fact that they were from Philistia, and that was a people group name, a national name. This refers to what's happening to us today. And the higher mind is enticed by the lower mind. And there's always this struggle between the two. The biblical narrative is a drama of that struggle. The narrative of Samson and Delilah. But each one of us is a Samson. And there's the power of the universe that's inside us, bursting out of us. We just need to walk the spiritual path to find it. We need to be awake and we need to be aware, something we haven't talked about a lot since we did that long series several months ago. And so we've all got this universal power, but we all languish and walk in the wrong places. We are all unaware of it sometimes, of what we're doing to ourselves to drain that power. So this is in this narrative of Samson. If you look at it esoterically, this is the lesson it's teaching. Samson's long hair relates to the growth from the higher centers, the head chakras, if you will. And then that growth is cut. It loses spiritual connectivity, and we become weak. The lower emotions bind spirit, and once we've given them power over us, those lower emotions will bind us. And when we're alone in meditation, if you meditate, you are with the Father, or Ra, or the God that you choose, the God that you worship, the God that you know is there, your God, and the Mother Isis. These are the family of spirit in the esoteric sense. So you can take the names off and interchange them, obviously. So 1,100 pieces of silver. 1 and 1 equals 1 and 1. 11 equals 11 stages of evolution. 12 is said to be the perfection. So 11 is either one step higher or one step down the ladder. And we're always so close to our true nature, and yet that last step is the hardest. Silver represents the moon, and the god of the moon is called Sin, S-I-N. It's the god of the moon. The moon, one of them anyway, the moon takes the light from the sun and reflects that back. It doesn't have any illumination of its own. So whatever we're dwelling in, it reflects back on us. So sin is really dwelling in the emotions. It has nothing to do with religious connotation. And so Delilah says to Samson, "Tell me, please, where your great strength lies, and wherewith you might be bound to the point where it doesn't work for you anymore. Is there a limitation to your strength?" And these are the emotions tempting the mind, going for the weakest link. Delilah representing the emotions. And Samson said to her, "If they bind me with 7 great green withs that are never dried, then I'll be weak, and I'll be as any other man." And so the 7 green withs, these represent the 7 chakras, so some have interpreted out of this story. The Muladhara, the Savasthana, the Manipura, the Anhatha, the Visuddha, the Aja, and the Sasarara. And it has relation to the 7 zodiac signs of Leo, Cancer, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn. This is one of the interpretations of this. And in the lower aspect, that which is wet is earth. So what he's saying is that by engaging in the earthly side of each chakra, he'll be as any other man, as he's going to the lowest expression of each one of those things. And hence the referral to the withs that were never dried. Now, he's not really telling her how he's going to be bound, how his strength is going to go. He's using this as a deception. So I don't want to tell her what the source of my strength is. And so it says, and the lords of the Philistines brought up 7 green withs, which had not been dried, and she bound them with them, vines. And now there were men lying in wait in her chamber, and she said to Samson, the Philistines are here. They're upon you, Samson. And he broke the withs as a thread is broken when it touches fire. And so his strength was not known. That's according to the scriptural passage. So what's playing out here is that we're playing kind of a Russian roulette with spiritual nature. Although we know we're essentially spirit and therefore cannot be broken, we may be getting lax in our lifestyles, not meditating, not expressing ourselves spiritually enough of the time. And so many people have reached these high states of consciousness only to fall back into their average world, their dream state, and lose themselves. And this is an allegory for that with Samson. And Samson said to her, if they bind me fast with new ropes that were never occupied, then I'll be weak, and I'll be as another man. Another deception. Now, rope is that divinity within us, which pulls us upwards. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it says, tell me my name, said the rope. Hair is thy name. It's the hair of Samson that's cut that pulls him down. New ropes that were never occupied. This is mixing with people who have no interest in spirituality. Now, this is all an esoteric breakdown. You might not agree with all these. This is one interpretation. So Delilah took new ropes and she bound him. Then she said, the Philistines are on you, Samson. And there were Philistines laying in wait in her chamber. And he broke off the ropes like they were nothing. And, of course, they all flee. And again, he breaks out of this, indicating that he can still come back to his spiritual side, thus defeating his lower nature. So, finally, Delilah says to Samson, now, what's Samson thinking by this point? Twice she's asked me what's going to take away my power. Twice she does that to me. Twice there's Philistines laying in wait for me. And what did he do to those Philistines? Did he kill them? Did they just run away and Samson forgot that they were there? By this time I'd go, hey, wait a cotton-picking minute. Each thing I told you would take away my strength, you did to me. And then the Philistines were here. Something's fishy. Does he do that? Delilah said to Samson, you've mocked me twice now and told me lies. Tell me where your mites can be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web. And she fastened it with the pin and said to him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awaked out of the sleep and went away with the pin of the beam with the web. And so this is archaic language from the Bible. And so this didn't work. And so these are like the 7 seals or the 7 chakras again, as are the 7 trumpets or the 7 locks also mentioned in the Bible. When one tries to obstruct the kundalini, but he's still able to get his spirituality back. And then she finally said to him, how canst thou say I love thee when thine heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times and hasn't told me the truth about your strength. And by now, and Samson still hasn't figured it out. Is he just a dumbass? So the number 3 in the Bible tells us that something is going to happen. Examples, Jesus was in the tomb 3 days. Jonah in the fish 3 days. So it represented a change of some sort. And the story in Samson in the Bible, it says when she pressed him with her words again and urged him, that his soul was so vexed unto death. Meaning, oh my God, woman, you are nagging me to death. And he told her with all his heart and said, there is no razor come upon my head, for I've been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I'll be weak and be like any other man. And so he can do anything in the world and still go back and meditate and transcend all the limits God has put upon himself. But if he cuts away that which is going from the higher, then he's spiritually dead. And so when Delilah figures out, he's told me his heart on this. She sent and called for the Philistines, and she gets him drunk, and he falls asleep on her lap. And she called for the men, and they shaved off his hair, and guess what? He lost his strength. And so she slept on his knees, and once we put all our trust in the lower, we cut off the higher part. That's when we get so addicted to the senses that we've surrendered in totality to it. And she called for the man to come and shave his head. The mind itself will cut you off, and you won't even know it's gone as you're now asleep in the world, falling asleep to spirit. It says the Philistines, they took him, they gouged out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with fetters of brass, and he ground grain in the prison house. Now, gouging out his eyes, we can't see the things we could before, and we're blind to the spirit, and brass is this earthly thing, this prison house. And our thoughts and emotions can truly bind us in prison, instead of reality being the creation of conscious choice. And it becomes a prison. And when we're ruled by either one of these aspects of the ego, we're in trouble. Only by tapping into our inner, higher mind and intuition can we truly be guided out of our enslaved positions, just as Samson was. So Samson was shackled to a giant grinding stone. He was blinded, and all he could do was push the grinding stone around and around and around every day. And this is what happens to us, figuratively speaking, when we're ruled by our lower nature. Life becomes an ever-repeating pattern of failure. It's as if we're going around and around the same mountain until we learn we can climb to the top to get a different perspective, and that the different perspective is a spiritual one. And then, of course, the Bible says, albeit his hair began to grow. And just as there was hope for Samson, there's hope for us in the esoteric side of this story. While Samson was in the midst of his trial, his hair grew back. And as the story grows, Samson asked the Lord for his strength back just one more time, because his hair had grown long enough again. We're to understand that Samson was again operating from the higher mind. And then they called Samson out, and he said, and they all mocked him in this celebration. He leans up against the pillars, asked to be brought there. And the temple here represents our mind. These two pillars represent the two aspects of us, the higher nature, the lower nature of the mind, and the conscious and the subconscious. And Samson pushed both of them down, kills himself and the other Philistines. At last, Samson found the balance between his two natures. And that caused the salvation of Israel, as all evil Philistines were killed off, or so they thought. The problem was they were left still in oppression to the Philistines. And so there's a lot of other application to the story, but we're out of time. In today's modern culture, we have it backward. We can illustrate the point with a true comic book hero, the Incredible Hulk. His great source of strength came from his emotions. If he got too emotional, he'd change into the Hulk. When he's provoked to anger, he changes into the Green Monster with incredible strength. And while he exhibited great strength, he seemed to lose his mind. He was completely dominated by his emotions, which caused him to commit some pretty destructive acts. And the story of Samson teaches us that when our thoughts and our emotions are ruling us, we too become self-destructive. And we're then ruled by external events instead of being in charge over them. This is the true meaning, I think, of the story of Samson, at least on an esoteric level. But Samson's power was never meant to be physical. It was spiritual power. The long hair worn by Samson represents this spiritual power that grows from the mind of a person operating from an elevated consciousness. So in other words, Samson's hair is the spiritual force growing from the higher mind. And we'll just kind of leave it at that for tonight because we're totally out of time, maybe even overtime. So, you guys, thanks for listening. See you Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for It's Sunday, Central Standard Time. You have a good weekend.